Okay, well, we're starting at 7:15, but if all the audience would like to come and sit down, we've got plenty of seats here, and I'll go through the rules and so on so we can start right on 15:15 and be out of here. Can we give these young people a big hand of applause, because they are the finalists, and because they're seniors, of course, as I said to them, they are the creme de la creme, so no pressure, guys, but it's going to be wonderful to hear all this. We've had two fantastic divisions. So this is the newest learning option, if you like, or component in FPS. It was international for the first time in 2015. Began in Australia about 3 or 4 years prior to that. So it's grown. We had 17 in the middle division. We had about 10 in the juniors, about 10 in the... It's growing, doubling each year. So fantastic to actually see. Just to remind you that it's about storytelling, not story writing. And therefore, the emphasis is on how they use their voice. They can use their hands, but they can't use their body to help them tell the story. They can't use their hands to be props. So it's about being expressive, but not acting out the story and telling the story with their voice and so on. They used, in the course of the year, they used the same topics that are used for scenario writing. When it comes to IC, they have to use the same topic that the GIP students have been using, criminal justice. But how it works is that 4 or 5 weeks before IC, they get sent special instructions. So it's basically guidelines as to the kinds of categories or the directions in which they might go with their story. And they've got 4 or 5 weeks to actually write it. So all these things that you've heard, or that you will hear, will have been done in 4 weeks. So it really is a matter of developing things at the moment. What they'll be doing is that they'll be coming on stage right, that's how it is, coming to the front. It's being live streamed and recorded. It's being videoed also. So no video recording by parents, please, and friends and family. That's actually a legal thing. We can't allow you to do that. That's the legal advice because of a whole range of things. But the live stream and recording is working perfectly. The video is working perfectly. And so you'll be able to go and see the performances as many times as you want on those recordings. There's at 4 minutes 30, I will hold up a red or a pinkish reddish folder, and that's their only time warning. They've got 5 minutes in all, so it's a 30-second warning. And of course, there are penalties for late finishes. And of course, the results will be announced on Sunday morning. Is it 15:15 yet? I'm not going to... We've got all the... I've got 2 minutes. 2 minutes, okay, all right.
I was having a picnic party with my family to celebrate my high school graduation. We were enjoying the bright sun on our faces and snacking on sandwiches. Suddenly, I saw police drones crowding around my head. They stopped right above my head and began making these obnoxious siren noises. I looked behind me, and about 6 robotic police canine dogs started charging towards me. and proliferating as they went. They started speaking. You are under virtual arrest. You cannot move beyond 15 feet. I couldn't comprehend what was going on. I looked over at my family, and they were all dumbfounded. I was in shock. I'm sorry, I don't know what I did. But it was no use. The robotic police dogs couldn't understand humans. Humans could only understand humans. The robotic canines released their invisible lasers around me and left. My senses came back to me. I didn't think this laser arrest was even real. Being defiant as I am, I started walking aimlessly, when after a few steps, I felt a continuous electric shock zapping my feet. I kept walking, hoping that this excruciating pain would somehow go away. It didn't. I ran back, convinced that I would do anything to get out of this. I finally came back to where my family was sitting. I still had no idea why I got laser arrested. My family went back home to try to figure out what was going on. Realization suddenly hit. I had to go to my job in 2 hours. I worked at a local burger joint to support my family. Both of my parents were physically disabled and couldn't work. So I became the primary source of income in my family. I needed to work, but I couldn't move away from my spot. I searched my brain for what to do to get out of this situation. Last week, my boss told me that if I missed one more day of work, I'd be fired. That couldn't happen. I needed to go to work. And tomorrow, I have a college orientation I have to go to. I need to go to college, graduate, and get a better job so I can support my family even more. I couldn't sit here in this ant-infested grass with laser boundaries forever. Suddenly, I got a call from my older sister. She said that the robotic police searched my criminal history and found that I have a history of crime. What crime? I thought. What crime? Then I understood. I recently manufactured a self-driving car. The consumer of the car, she crashed it. She allowed it to crash into a fence, and it killed a woman, and I was taking the blame for it. That's probably why I was under laser arrest, I thought. Thank you.
In the United States Court for the District of Columbia, the state of Wisconsin versus James Bedford. In the name and by the authority of the state of Wisconsin, the grand jury charges guilty for charges of future aggravated homicide. Date of offense, June 17th, 2041. I barely had time to set down my steaming cup of coffee and collapse into my chair before my boss comes barging into my office, slapping a thick folder onto my desk. The indictment came out this morning. I want the libel on my desk by tomorrow. Without a pause, she turns around and rushes straight out of the room, leaving me staring at the indictment. The jurors of the grand jury of the state of Wisconsin, in the name and by the authority of the state, do find and present that the above-named defendant in and on the date of offense set forth above would have unlawfully, with prior calculation and design, caused the death of William Tennant. Another day, another innocent life taken away. That's my job. I sign the papers and they stick them behind bars. Easy enough, huh? All thanks to the new Crime Predictive Operating Unit, also known as the CPOU. We don't even have to lift a finger to call the robocops. In fact, they come to us. At time 10:47 p.m., the victim, William Tennant, gained unlawful access into the defendant's property by use of disintegrator. At that time, 10:47 p.m., the defendant, originally sleeping, woke with the assumption that someone had gained unlawful entry into his home. Following, at time 10:49 p.m., the defendant summoned his invisible safe, entered his handprint, and took a hold of his shockwave. At time 10:50 p.m., a robotic police officer of the state of Wisconsin gained forced entry into the home of the defendant before rendering both the victim and the defendant immobile by use of force field bubble. Warrant for entry is posted under Exhibit D. You see, instead of waiting for people to commit crimes, the CPOU can actually tell when and how someone is going to commit a crime, giving the police an opportunity to arrest said individuals before it happens. Then they are accused, charged, and put away, all based on a future crime that they had yet to commit. In the name and by the authority of the Crime Predictive Operating Unit, also known as the CPOU, the defendant was arrested on charges of future aggravated homicide. The CPOU predicted that at time 10:49 p.m., the defendant would have entered the area where the victim was gaining unlawful access into his drawer. Following, at time 10:02 p.m., the defendant would have raised his shockwave in the direction of the victim and would have pulled the trigger 1 second later, rendering the victim deceased. My question is, how do they know for sure that you're going to commit the crime? It's accurate, the government says, 99.9% of the time, the government says. But what about that 0.1%? What about that 0.1% of doubt? What about that 0.1% of mercy? Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? Based on these facts, the state of Wisconsin, seeking to maintain the status quo and avoid future crime, advises a twofold sentencing for the defendant, James Bedford. The state of Wisconsin advises an amnesia shock be delivered to the defendant to clear any prior incidents that have made the defendant readily disposable towards violence, as well as a 2-year isolation from any human or robotic contact so that the defendant may reflect on his wrongdoing. I hate this. I hate this case, I hate this trial, I hate this crime, I hate this law, I hate this job, I hate all of it. But there is nothing I can do about it. All I do is write the papers and sign the documents and write the papers and watch people get put away and write the papers and hope that one day it's not me. And through the peace and dignity of the state of Wisconsin, signed, Attorney M. Davidson. Thank you.
All right, so the title of this story is called Trapped. A man in a dark suit stood next to the railing of a glass skyscraper, a glass of wine held in his trembling hands. As his red eyes stared into the darkness, a hateful chuckle disrupted his thoughts. Hey, Adam, buddy, you still mad over how I got promoted over you? The storm of fury, already building in Adam's body, smashed through the paper-thin confines of his self-control. Before he even realized what he was doing, his fist shot forward, met something solid with a sickening crunch, and came back, smeared with blood. Adam jolted awake in his bed, sweating. He curled into a ball, but couldn't help but sob, unable to forget the words on the back of his shirt, which, in the dim light, read, Pre-Crime Detention Center, Unit 402. Day 3, the pre-crime trial. The pixels on the walls of Adam's room shifted into an image of a courtroom. 3 holographic judges, an old bearded man, a stern-looking woman, and an android, distinguishable by the glowing yellow circle near its temple, sat side by side. Your Honor, the prosecution began, on the night of May 28, 2038, the city's CloudWalk facial recognition software contacted the RoboCops when they found Adam Smith near the railing of a glass skyscraper, classified with having a murder index. Luckily, the RoboCops were able to stop Adam just 0.5 seconds before he was about to assault would-be victim Eric Myers. I strongly urge the court to approve of the implementation of a nano-tracker that will allow for the tracking of Adam's psychological health 24/7 for the rest of his life. Adam watched as a hand reassuringly squeezed his hologram's shoulder. The elderly, gray-haired woman who had been with him since the beginning of his detention proclaimed, "Your Honor, through brain tests and DNA scans conducted right after Adam's birth, it was found that he contained something known as the warrior gene, which causes him to be more aggressive and sometimes lash out violently. However, I would like to remind the court that Mr. Eric Myers came especially to provoke the defendant after the defendant found out that he had lost the promotion to Mr. Myers after the company's annual meeting. I urge the court to take this fact into consideration, as well as Mr. Adams' genetic situation, and to grant him a full acquittal." Day 4, Adam's testimony. Your Honor, my name is Adam Smith. I am a victim of this pre-crime system. Along with the geographical, racial, and social-economical biases in these algorithms, these genetic biases now form another one. I am trapped by this violent gene, and I have been trapped ever since I was born. I've been trapped on this so-called pre-crime list ever since I was born. Being on this list has ensured that I never get a fair chance in life, because my life is stained by this label of being some sort of monster. Regardless of whatever crime you convict me of, regardless of whatever sentence you give me, I am forever doomed to live out my life as a would-be criminal. Isn't that punishment enough? Day 5, the verdict. We concur that Adam Smith possesses a high risk of violence, a high chance of recidivism, and poses a high risk to the community, the android judge intoned, in order to maintain and lower our low crime rate, which is 1.86% for a population of over 100,000. We judges proclaim that Adam Smith will receive a nano-tracker for public safety. We would rather be safe than sorry. Day 7, a new life. Back near the railing of the glass skyscraper, Adam glared at the smart cam he knew was watching him, hidden by a nearby lamp. Bitter. For all of the energy and time spent, he had achieved nothing. The wind was howling, but now it seemed gentle, almost inviting. Adam slowly stepped up onto the railing, precariously, extended one foot in front of the other, and then toppled forward, untrapped.
A holographic courtroom surrounds me, crystal clear figures in varying attire with their eyes trained on me. But none of it's real. The lawyer pacing the floor in front of me isn't actually there. I'm not actually here. I'm in the back room of the county jailhouse. But for the purposes of the trial, we're all in this holographic cloud. 12 strangers, some lawyers, and a judge, all gathered to determine my fate.
Will you please tell us what happened on July 13th, 2048?
There it is. The night that defines me, that follows me and haunts me. I can't forget it. I can't forget the vibration that came after tapping the trigger button the first time and the last time I ever shot a gun. It echoes through my hands and my arms and my chest, making my heart race. And for a moment, I was in a movie where time slows down and you can see the bullet crawling towards its target. And this time, the target was Jamie Sullivan's chest. So I stand up and I say, I got home from my classes at the college, and Jamie was drunk and mad, and he was yelling on and on about how all he does is work at the police station, and I don't do anything, and I'm pursuing these stupid dreams at the college, and why couldn't I do something useful for once in my life? And so I went and started doing the dishes, and that was fine until he picked up a plate and chucked it at the cabinet behind me. I can still feel the shards of ceramic digging into my cheek, but that's nothing compared to the pulsar, an instrument he was given implanted into his hand to protect the people as a police officer. Instead, he shoved me against the kitchen wall and put it on my arm, sending electric shocks through my body. And it hurt, and it went over and over, and when he took his hand off, I ran. I hid in the front closet until he stopped yelling. Then I came out, and he apologized, and he said he was sorry, it would never happen again. But he'd said that before. And so I stood up and I said, you ever hurt me again and I'll leave. I just made him angry, and he started yelling again, so I backed up. I backed into the kitchen, and he followed me, and he was yelling, and he took his hand to activate the pulsar again, so I grabbed the gun from on top of the fridge, and I pointed it at him, and that's the moment that took it from one of our typical fights to the first time I had ever gone against him. And he came towards me, and I told him to stop. I swear I told him. But he didn't, so I shot him. Right there in the kitchen. The entire courtroom stands motionless. This is the moment they're waiting for. Some look concerned, others skeptical, but all still. This is the moment they've been waiting for, the moment of the gunshot, the motive of the gunshot. Was it self-defense? Am I really this poor, abused housewife that I claim to be? Or was I angry? Was it just the last time I was going to let him hurt me? Did I have other options? Am I a murderer? I used to hate jury duty. You know, going down to the courthouse, sitting there for hours and hours, filling out paperwork. But now I don't mind it so much with these newfangled hollow court things. But the information I'm given before the trial is brief. You know, woman shoots husband in home, claims self-defense, and listening to her testimony, it's pretty clear that's what it was. So when the room transforms and I'm in the presence of the other jury members, including an artificial intelligence robot, because that's one of our peers now, I'm the first to speak up, and I say, you know, self-defense, not guilty. Then a short woman with an angry face stands, and she says, I was in the military for 10 years. I know what a shocker is supposed to do, and therefore the wife of an officer would know that too. It measures the victim and knows what the heart rate and pulmonary system can take, and it does not exceed that. A pulsar physically cannot kill its victim. She knew this and therefore knew her life was not at threat. She killed her husband knowing he was not going to kill her. Guilty. I stand up to say this is ridiculous, but the artificial bot speaks first. We all remember the case of Nebraska versus State, and therefore can all determine she did not have empirical evidence to prove she thought her life was at stake. You all know this means that she must be charged with murder. She must be charged guilty. That's your justice.
April 24th, 2042. Sophia, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I've missed your entire childhood, and you know that I've wished for nothing more than to just be there for everything. I know you don't know much about why I'm in here, but I can't give you the details about it. I just can't. I can only let you know that it was arson. And the fire started so fast, and you were my first priority, and you've never stopped being my first priority. But I promise it's almost over. Prison is becoming more and more bearable to be in. Ever since the population started to decrease, they started to ask us whether or not we needed more things to help us get through our punishment here. They took everything into consideration and applied a considerable amount of them to our prisons. We could choose whether or not we had a roommate, all of our bathrooms were finally enclosed for a little bit of privacy, and we could even take college classes. It was crazy. They built a computer lab for us to take our college classes. That's the only way you could take them nowadays. Many of the security officers and all were all robots. It was very unsettling to hear somebody that wasn't human ask me how my day was. The effects of a maximum security prison have a very high psychological effect, and all of these were meant to decrease it and to decrease the amount of prisoners that were coming back after they were released. Despite all of the great changes that have been made, it's still devastating to think that I could be in prison for the rest of my life for something I know I didn't do. But I do have some new profound hope. Officer Bohr, who is one of the few human officers left, came and sat next to me in lunch one day as I was ordering my lunch off of the screen. He said, Maya, I know something that can help you get out of here. And I was so excited when I heard this, but of course I wasn't very hopeful. He said, they're bringing a new system in here that can finally prove you innocent. They can see into your mind. I didn't believe Officer Bohr when he was telling me how important this could be for my case. He handed me the application, though I was hesitant. I read through the application about 5 times before it actually hit me. This system could change my life. If my case gets approved by the county judge, I could be released immediately from prison. After reading through this application multiple times, I realized that there was a page that described what this system was going to be doing to me. The system would, or the judge, not really the judge, more the judge watching, but the doctors would put me under a local anesthetic and program a cage to put over my head that would read my brain, look for certain memories that could determine where I was and if I did actually do this. So, they'll replay the day of April 2nd, 2018 and see exactly what I was seeing before, during, and after the fire was started. After I was rereading the description of the system, I started to get very nervous. What if this didn't work and I never got to see you again? After thinking about all of these bad things that could be happening, I decided to put all of these away and fill out the application and just go for it. I mean, what's so bad that could happen? So, yesterday, on April 23rd, I sat at the desk sitting against my wall in my cell with this letter from the judge in my hand. This letter would decide my future, whether or not I got to see you again. I carefully slid the letter anxiously into my robo-reader. My mind was going 100 miles an hour and I was waiting for it to start reading anxiously. Suddenly, it went boop and read, "Congratulations, Maya. Your request to use the memory pool system has been approved." The word "congratulations" left my robo-reader's system. I immediately broke down in tears. They were finally going to see what really happened that night. I was finally going to see you again. I promise everything's almost over, Sophia. Thank you.
aggravated battery, the physical harm to someone you live with. In the state of California, is punishable by up to 4 years. A felony, the subject of my worst fears. They say I pushed my mom against the dresser, that throughout the years I was the oppressor. I threw a lamp at my dad. They have proof of the lamp across the room, a gash on his arm and a black eye. Fearing for his life, he was about to die. Pictures were taken, injuries accounted for, ones visible to the eye, but nothing more. My father paid for a lawyer. My mom took no part. She claims I did her no harm, but that doesn't matter. I got assigned a public defender, overworked and underpaid, no time for a case to be made. I swore a vow and couldn't tell a lie. I don't regret it. You don't understand why. I'm not sorry. I would do it again. That landed me with 3 concrete walls and 1 made of bars, 2 beds but 3 roommates, and everything was ours, not mine. 4 people and only 2 meals. They called it family style, though it lost its appeal. Robo-guards monitored the prison since 2048. They determine right from wrong. Lay a friendly hand on someone's shoulder and they call it a fight. You are too strong. Jab a fork in someone's side over a slice of toast. The fork must have slipped. They almost notice, but not quite. They can't distinguish nice from mean. Their entire thoughts are based off of something placed between your veins and your left arm. It was supposed to keep everyone out of harm. No real guards mean no civilians hurt. No real guards mean fair punishments, and robo-guards are always alert, except they can't sense emotion or always judge a situation. A tracker that tracked your heartbeat and location was supposed to fix that problem, but now anything but normal is offensive because happiness cannot be felt in jail. High-fiving, congratulating someone on bail is not good. It causes your heartbeat to get faster. That means you are feeling a bad emotion. But they forgot other emotions have the same effect too, like love and devotion, but they cause your pulse to get faster. Those feelings are not allowed, you have to master keeping your pulse rate down. Morals and ethics will never be the same. Not to steal, don't pick fights, it's all just a game. Those things don't apply. I have to stay dead calm as I hurt the peeping Tom, spying on me in the bathroom. What's one more, murder or battery, they always assume. It's not the common. She was scared, her heartbeat got faster. Mine was slower, therefore I was acting in defense against her. And I don't understand how they can reach a verdict without all the facts. And that's not fair. They didn't look close enough. I wasn't that tough. They found 2 handprints on my mom's arms, but my hands are too small. They wouldn't have fit. I would never cause her harm. I wasn't that strong or that mean. I used to come home early from school just to clean, but I couldn't take it any longer. I landed a punch right on his shoulder, and I knocked over a lamp as I was running out. He told a different story when the cops came out. I used to pray that he'd come home in a good mood, but most of the time we were black and blued. I hoped that maybe one day he just wouldn't come home. Now, what am I left with? No one wants a high school dropout right out of jail, whose emotional state is at best frail. And I know for sure they're not gonna want me. My pulse is getting faster, they won't like what they see when they get here. His body on the ground over there. I finally got revenge on the man who put me in jail. He deserved it from the beginning, and I wouldn't have been capable of this before jail. And now, I know my mom and sister won't have to worry anymore or have to fear walking through that door. Prison can make someone dangerous. There's only so much people can endure before they endanger us. There's only so much we can take before it changes us. If this is rehabilitation, then how are we to find salvation?
Checkmate, Nick. Even through my younger brother's unruly blonde waves, I could see the frustration in his eyes. Kara, how? You're too predictable, Nick. All I have to do to get what I want is outmaneuver my opponent. I grinned cynically from across the break room chessboard. Just like life. Our ear implants simultaneously crackled with the AI dispatcher's voice. Anonymous tip of a suspicious person loitering at the abandoned warehouse on Pondshire Street and Knight Avenue. Suspect is female, 5'4" to 5'6", brown hair, possibly armed. Proceed with caution. Hey, Kara, maybe this is the murderous arms customizer you've been hunting for 7 months. Nick grunted as we donned our police-issue exoskeletal suits. Well, Nick, the description does match my prime suspect, Megan King. Hopeful, we flew swiftly to the GPS coordinates. Judging from the police cloud's live stream surveillance, I would say that the suspect has already entered the warehouse. Nick radioed as we arrived, assuming his role as senior officer. Search front to back and flush him out. Swiftly and silently, we swept through different sides of the decrepit building, its expanses becoming a labyrinth of doorways. Suddenly, I heard Nick scream. Rushing to a small storage room, I found him limp on the floor, his exoskeletal frame now a heap of sparks and smoke. Dispatcher, officer down, requesting backup. Upon arrival, trauma drones pronounced him dead on the scene. My sincerest apologies for your loss, Agent Bishop. Nick was one of our best investigators. Although you can no longer keep this case because of your personal connection, I'm transferring to you a suspicious murder case involving poisoning. With your uncanny memory and observation, I'm sure you'll be able to identify the killer and the pattern soon. Best wishes, Kara. I ended Sheriff Collins' holo message and scrutinized the toxin case. My mind, however, remained riveted on Nick's tragic death. So during lunch, I slipped another investigator's bio ID off his wrist and used that to access the updated weapons report. Officer Nicholas Bishop, cause of death was severe bone crush trauma. Anonymous tip came from an untraceable burn phone. A police-issued taser was found at the scene, having 3D printed modifications that amplified its power 11.7 times to a fatal dosage, electrocuting the victim instantly and damaging the suit. The scanner updated. Taser registered to Sheriff Joshua Collins. Hair follicle found in a 3D printed component matches Megan King's DNA. Drones deployed to her residence. Satisfied, I returned to my case. Later that night, I found Collins as he exited a restaurant, and we began strolling down the block. So, did King confess to all 5 murder charges, Sheriff? No, she only confessed to the first, adamantly denying Nick's and the others. And how did she get my taser? She probably pinched it from you when you and I made that house call. She was acting pretty suspiciously. Yeah, Bishop, but lately, especially with our serial murder cases, the suspects only admit to the first of those crimes. I mean, with such obvious evidence that you find, why would they bother adamantly denying the others? It's nonsensical. We rounded the end of the block into an abandoned alleyway. Things don't always have to make sense, Collins. They just have to be believable. I plunged the syringe I'd concealed in my suit's carbon sheath into his arm, and he sank to the ground gasping. Don't bother calling. The police live streams are all jammed. I smugly patted my modified transmission blocker, formerly my burn phone. The toxin is the same concoction used in the transferred murder file you just gave me. You'll be dead in 97 seconds. The murder pattern will match my killer's profile perfectly, fooling the AI jury. You, Nick, my dad, you never could seem to keep your authority to yourself. The moonlight glimpsed off his arm briefly, just long enough for me to see the broken syringe needle lodged in the nanotech armor he'd been wearing. Collins sprang up, and I began dodging his violent blows, racking my case memory for something useful. Perfect! I seized a broken lead pipe lying nearby and struck Collins down with it. Any last words, Sheriff? I wound up over his reeling figure. Yeah, Bishop. I did undercover work too. He raised a gravimetric pulsar to my head, the modified one I brought on my belt. Checkmate. Before I could react, I heard the trigger's deadening click.
The title of my story is The Dead Zone. It's June 2043. My name is Scott Burnham, and I'm the first released Dead Zone cybercriminal. Let me explain. The cybercriminal part is pretty easy to understand. It's internet crime, cybercrime. I'll explain a few of my escapades to give you a little bit of an understanding of my career in cybercrime. For one, I've barely lifted a finger in the past few years to fend for myself. With the digital economy nowadays, digital communications between banks, investment firms, etc., siphoning a dollar or two here and there is quite simple. I only emptied one personal bank account during my career. I'm sorry, Dan, in the National Bank of Vietnam. Beyond that, most of you would deem my entertainment to amount to trolling. A few digital identities hijacked, reputations used. I'm sorry, Sarah, who may or may not have lost her job due to a few tweets sent. That summarizes my cybercrime career pretty well. So how did I end up here? What is the dead zone? Well, I'll start with how I ended up in the dead zone. It was March 2042. I was on a justice mission with a part of my local subgroup of Anonymous. We were removing the digital assets of a local cybercriminal. We didn't want them to be moved elsewhere before he was aware that he had been uncovered. As a result, we had to hack into Amazon.com's cloud storage systems. But you see, Amazon had some pretty nifty technology. They had AI bots that would walk around in the network, just like a human guard would walk around in a prison. If they saw anything odd, they would catalog it or report it to the appropriate authorities as necessary. That's when I made my mistake. I was walking around in the network, and for one moment, I allowed my IPv6 address to be unmasked. FEC0:, that's irrelevant at the moment, but it read out across the screen. I was immediately reported to the local police. Now you see, back then, while digital traffic was not at the level it is now, it was still rapidly increasing, and road traffic had decreased to the point that police response times are already down to 2 to 3 minutes. As a result, I was picked up almost instantly. My trial isn't really worth mentioning, as it's one of the fastest cybercrime trials on record. I was instantly linked using my IP address to many of my other crimes, and as such, it only lasted 29 minutes and 41 seconds before a jury reached a guilty verdict. I deserved it, to say the least. As you can see, I'm regretting what I've done and have changed because of the dead zone. So what is the dead zone? It's a prison for cybercriminals. It's like going back in time, but now. There's no digital communication. The dead zone, that name is because it's a Faraday cage. It blocks all cell signals and Wi-Fi signals. The only external form of communication is one analog phone line from the outside world under the ocean into the warden's office. Yes, we're on an island that is only reached by one shuttle running on a 2-hour schedule, except between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. Supposedly we sleep at some point. Beyond that, there's 6 wings to the prison. Even the electrical grid is unreachable by us. All the lights are controlled by one room in each of the 6 wings. While at the prison, we're encouraged to take part in many physical pursuits: basketball, soccer, ping pong. Some of us had never encountered those before due to our digital existence. Well, maybe we've seen them, but never participated. I myself like ping pong. And after about 15 months and 1,247 games of ping pong, and a lot of good behavior, I was finally released. What do I mean by that? Well, I was physically released, but I was on digital probation. What does that mean? Every action I made digitally was categorized. If I made one mistake, it was flagged, and I could have been put back into the dead zone. As such, from this, what did I learn? I experienced the helplessness that my victims beforehand had felt. I began to understand the void that was my life outside of my digital existence. I had been stripped of my digital identity, and now was almost nothing. I began to rebuild. I understood the kingdom I had built of greed and selfishness. And now, because of the dead zone, I was finally able to understand what the dead zone, my life outside of the digital, truly was.
Okay, so can we give all of our senior division snuff performance? Some wonderful stories there. Okay, thank you all very much for attending this, and we look forward to hearing the results on Sunday morning. All right, thank you.